It started with a creak. That quiet, familiar creak of the kitchen floor I knew too well. The one just before the fridge, where the tile was uneven and always caught your heel if you weren't paying attention. It was past midnight, and I had wandered downstairs without turning on the light, barefoot and restless, haunted by the usual hum of silence that filled our house after dark. I wasn't expecting anyone else to be awake. So when I saw him, Adam, sitting at the table, hunched over a cup of something warm, his face softly lit by the golden glow of the stovetop light, I froze. His eyes lifted, calm, not startled. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. I shook my head slowly. "No. You." He offered a lopsided smile. "Same." My instinct was to turn around, go back upstairs, crawl into bed next to a man who hadn't asked me how I was in over 6 months. But something about the stillness of the room and the stillness in him made me pause. It felt different. Not intrusive. Not wrong. Just still. So I walked to the cabinet, pulled down a mug, white ceramic, one of the chipped ones I refused to throw away, and poured myself a little coffee from the pot he'd made. It was barely warm, but I didn't care. It gave me a reason to sit across from him. The wood chair was cool against my legs. I pulled my robe tighter, the sleeves falling over my knuckles. We didn't speak for a moment, just sipped. The kitchen was filled with quiet hums, the soft buzz of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, the occasional groan of the old pipes behind the walls. And us, breathing. He leaned back slightly in his chair, one hand wrapped around his mug, the other resting loosely on the table. His hair was messy, sleep mussed or maybe shower damp, and his t-shirt was wrinkled, hanging loose on his frame. He looked like someone who didn't belong to this hour, and yet somehow it fit him. "Strange how loud a quiet house can be," he said, eyes still on his drink. I nodded. "You get used to it." He glanced up. "Do you?" There was something in the way he asked it. Not a challenge. Not curiosity. Just something deeper. Like he already knew the answer. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. He tilted his head slightly, studying me. "You seem like someone who notices things. Someone who feels more than she lets on." I blinked. His words weren't flirtation. They were observation. Which, somehow, was worse. Daniel used to say things like that. Back when we were new. When I mattered. When the way I stirred my tea or folded laundry or bit my lip when I was thinking made him pause and smile like he'd discovered something rare. That man was gone. Now I was something domestic. Predictable. Warm food. Clean sheets. Polite laughter at dinner parties. I wasn't a mystery anymore. I wasn't even a person, some days. Just part of the furniture. But Adam looked at me like he saw something that surprised him. And it made me want to sit up straighter. Breathe deeper. Be seen. I ran a finger along the rim of my mug. "You're not what I expected." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh!" "I don't know," I said. "You're quiet. Thoughtful. I guess I assumed you'd be more like your dad." He laughed. It was soft. Honest. I get that a lot. But I think I spent too many years watching how not to be. His words hung there, soft but sharp. I glanced toward the hallway, toward the bedroom where Daniel lay, probably snoring softly into his pillow, unaware, as always of the time, the silence, the spaces between things. "I don't know when we stopped talking," I whispered. I hadn't meant to say it out loud. Adam didn't push. He just listened. Really listened. It startled me how easy it felt, speaking to him in the dark. "You ever feel like you're slowly disappearing?" I asked. "Like you're still there, still doing everything you're supposed to, but somehow, no one really notices anymore?" His jaw tightened just slightly. Then, after a pause, he said, "All the time." We were quiet again. Not awkward. Just full. The kitchen, once cold and echoing, now felt small, warmer. A second later, without thinking, I shifted my foot and it brushed against his under the table. Just the edge, just a whisper of contact. I froze. So did he. But he didn't pull away. Neither did I. Something clicked in that moment. Not lust, not romance. Something older than both, the ache of being known, of being witnessed. He looked at me then. Really looked. His eyes were soft, unmoving, like he wasn't afraid to sit in the silence and let it say more than words could. I broke the gaze first, my heart hammering. I should probably head back upstairs, I said, standing too fast, nearly knocking over the chair. He nodded. Yeah, of course. I turned, took a few steps. But before I left the room, I paused in the doorway. I like the quiet, I said, but sometimes it's nice to have company in it. He smiled, just barely. Yeah, he said. It is. And then I walked back into the dark hallway, my footsteps quieter than they should have been, my pulse louder than it had been in years. That night, lying beside Daniel's unmoving body, I stared at the ceiling and thought about a chipped mug, a soft voice, and the way it felt to be looked at like I mattered again. It was just a cup of coffee, but everything changed after that. After that night, things didn't go back to normal. Not that anyone else would have noticed. We still passed each other in the hallway like polite ghosts. Still shared meals when Daniel was home. Still kept the house running like a well-oiled machine. But something shifted. I could feel it in the air. Like the moment right before a summer storm, when the wind stills, the light changes, and everything holds its breath. The next morning, I found the sugar jar pushed slightly out of place on the counter. It took me a second to realize why it made my heart stutter. Underneath, it was a folded napkin. On it, written in small, looping handwriting. I don't think you're invisible. Just that. No name. No explanation. But I knew. And for reasons I still can't explain, I didn't throw it away. I folded it smaller and tucked it into my sweater pocket like it was something precious. Like it meant something. Because it did. That night, I stayed at the table a little longer after dinner. Daniel excused himself early, already half on his phone, murmuring something about emails. I was halfway through stacking plates when Adam reached over and gently took one from my hand. I've got it, he said. Our fingers brushed. I didn't pull away fast enough. His eyes met mine. Not hungry, not demanding, just aware. Painfully, beautifully aware. I don't mind the quiet, he said softly, but it's easier when you're in it. I didn't know how to respond to that. So I just nodded and stepped aside. But my hands were shaking as I wiped the counter, and I couldn't look him in the eye again for the rest of the evening. After that, everything became a pattern of quiet collisions. Little things. Barely things. His shoulder brushing mine as we passed in the hallway. His hand resting on the back of my chair just a moment too long when he leaned to grab something. His voice dropping lower when it was just the two of us talking. Mine? Doing the same. There was one night I remember too clearly. Daniel was out of town again. I was curled on the couch, reading the same paragraph for the third time when Adam sat down at the other end. Not close, but closer than usual. We didn't speak at first. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the wall clock and the hum of the heater. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, "What were you like before?" I blinked. Before? Before this, he said, gesturing vaguely around the house. Before Daniel. Before everything. I let the book fall onto my lap. I used to laugh louder, I said after a pause, and dance in the kitchen. I wore red lipstick on weekdays. I had a list of places I wanted to see and a journal full of things I thought I'd write one day. He nodded, eyes steady on mine. I believe that. Silence. Why do you ask? I whispered. Because I see pieces of her sometimes, he said. The woman you used to be. And I think she's still in there. Waiting. My breath caught. The room was suddenly too warm. I should go to bed, I said, standing too quickly. But I didn't move, because he was still looking at me, like I was something worth holding on to. Something breaking he didn't want to let fall. You deserve more than waiting, he said. And then, just like that, I walked away. Because if I didn't, I wasn't sure I'd be able to. In the days that followed, the space between us kept shrinking. He'd leave small notes. Nothing big. Nothing obvious. You looked peaceful today. I miss your laugh. You're still here. I see you. I kept them all, tucked inside a box behind winter scarves in the back of my closet. I started wearing earrings again, putting lotion on my hands, drinking tea in the sunroom because he once said the light looked good on me there. I told myself it was harmless. Just coffee, just company, just someone noticing me. But late at night, I'd lie awake and remember the weight of his gaze across the kitchen table. The way his voice dipped when he said my name. The way my heart reacted to his footsteps outside my door. How I knew it was him before I even looked. Then came the library moment. I was dusting the shelves in the study when I knocked over a book. It landed open, pages bent. I picked it up, ready to close it, when I saw something tucked inside. A sketch of me. Not posed, not prepared. Just real. Me in the sunroom, sipping from my mug, barefoot, hair messy, eyes lost somewhere far away. I stared at it for too long. My throat tight, my chest hollow and full at once. He had drawn me like I mattered, like he saw something worth capturing. I wanted to cry. I didn't. Instead, I slipped the drawing back into the book and left it exactly where I found it. But that night, I couldn't meet his eyes. Because I knew. And I think he knew I knew. We were no longer standing at the edge. We were already falling. It didn't feel like a fall. It felt like floating. As if for one night, the world softened its edges and let us live between the rules. No guilt. No logic. No consequences. Just breath. Heat. Presence. We hadn't planned anything. We hadn't spoken in codes. There was no candlelight, no music, no staged intimacy. There was just silence. That heavy, aching silence that had followed us from the very first cup of coffee. And when I touched his face, when his hands found the small of my back, when our lips met in the soft hush of the hallway, it didn't feel like sin. It felt like permission. To be held. To be wanted. To be remembered as something more than the woman who makes the dinner and folds the towels just right. It happened in pieces. Slow. Tender. Unspoken. The way his hand hovered near me, just enough to feel the hesitation, the want, the restraint. The way he paused, asking with his eyes before taking one more step. The way I closed my eyes, not to escape, but to stay in the moment longer. We didn't need a destination. What passed between us didn't need a place. It needed silence, and we had that. It happened there, in the living room, where everything still smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old books. The silence of the room shifted around us, like even the house was holding its breath, like it knew how heavy the moment was. He looked at me like I was the story he'd never dared to tell. And I let him, because I wanted to remember what it felt like when someone chose me. Not out of routine, not out of obligation, but because they could not. Afterward, we lay in silence. The room was still, breathless, the kind of stillness that doesn't ask for anything. His arm was draped across my waist. His head rested close to mine. We stayed close, unmoving. Like even distance might break what had just passed between us. He didn't speak. Neither did I. I stared at the ceiling, my heart strangely calm. No panic. No shame. Just the quiet realization this would change everything, and yet, somehow, I felt more myself than I had in years. I drifted into sleep, wrapped in something I hadn't felt in years, peace, fully, finally. Not because I was reckless, because I was tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of shrinking. And just for one night, I let myself expand. The morning was colder. Not the weather. The silence. Adam wasn't in the room when I woke, but I could smell coffee brewing. I could hear the gentle clink of dishes being washed. I wrapped myself in my robe and walked into the kitchen. He was there, already dressed. Hair damp, eyes tired. He looked at me, not guilty, not proud, just aware of the weight of what we now shared. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," I replied. There was a long pause before he finally spoke again. "I don't regret it." I inhaled slowly, fingers tightening on the edge of the counter. "I do," I whispered. Not because I didn't want it, but because I did. He looked down. "I'm married," I said. "That doesn't change, even if everything else does." "He doesn't see you," Adam said. "But he's still my husband." He nodded, quiet, understanding. But that didn't make it easier. "You weren't a mistake," I added. But maybe I was wrong to believe I could hold on to a feeling that doesn't belong to me anymore. "You didn't use me," he said. "You found yourself." I wanted to cry, but I didn't. "Go," I said gently, before I forget that this wasn't meant to last. He left, not slamming the door, not with tears, just gone. Like a season that passed through you before you even noticed it had begun. Daniel came home 2 nights later. He brought me a souvenir from the airport, a scarf in a color I never wore, with a tag still on and no note attached. He pressed a quiet goodbye against my forehead and asked, "How was the week?" "Quiet," I said. "We ate dinner." He talked about hotel breakfasts, presentation slides, a delay at the gate. I nodded, smiled at the right places, said the right things. It was as if I'd never disappeared, as if nothing had changed. And maybe, for him, it hadn't. Adam left that weekend. No dramatic exit. No final conversation. Just a note, folded and tucked inside the cutlery drawer. "You reminded me that real things don't have to last to matter." I read it 3 times. Then I burned it over the kitchen sink. Not out of anger, but because some things are too fragile to keep, too sacred to store in drawers and boxes. It's been 4 months now. Daniel still sleeps with his back to me, still forgets the way I take my tea, still kisses me out of habit. I don't blame him, not anymore. He doesn't see me, and I'm done screaming in silence. I wear that blue scarf sometimes, not because I like it, but because it reminds me that I, too, can pretend. And as for me, some nights, I sit on that same couch, mug in hand, lights low, the clock ticking behind me like a heartbeat, and I remember the way it felt to be seen, not as a wife, not as a mother, not as someone doing her duty, but as a woman, with a past, with a pulse, with something still quietly alive behind her ribs. It started with a cup of coffee, but it wasn't the coffee. It was the moment I stopped being invisible. And the price I paid to feel real, if only for a little while.